everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and I'm excited to be here with you today to discuss some Major League Soccer. Here with me to do so is the champion of your CONCACAF hearts. It's Mr. Joe Lowry. Hello, Joe.
See, everybody now. No? Okay, that's all right. Taylor, I'm stoked to be here. These are some of my favorite shows of the year because there's so much going on. We were talking before we started recording. There are multiple big-ticket, like segment one-worthy topics that we're not even probably going to talk about at all today. The doc is deep. Let's just put it that way. The doc is deep, and that excites me a lot.
Joe, I'm happy that you were excited. I'm happy you got your big-time billing. I'm struggling to come up with big-time billing for our other co-host on the day. So I'm going to say Josh Sargent's new best friend. It's Jeff Reuter. Hello, Jeff.
Yes, of course. I think that whenever anyone who's from the broader Midwest comes back to Major League Soccer, and is Missouri part of it? Listen, if we're distracting you by having the conversation of Missouri's status in the Midwest, that's enough time for me and Josh to, kind of find our common ground and get him acclimated. So I've already won.
I'll tell you this.
You keep talking.
Josh Sargent, Wikipedia tells me, is from O'Fallon, Missouri, and when you hover over O'Fallon, Missouri, you get a picture of a log cabin. I'm saying that's Midwest.
And I have a dear friend named Fallon. So, look at that. It's like we're already finding our common ground.
Like a real deer or like a...
No,
y'all have a lot of those in the Midwest.
Adult human, and thanks for clarifying.
Gotcha.
I do have deer friends, but she is not one
Just
of them.
had to be
She's
sure,
a human, who is a friend who is deer. Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you.
Moving away from the deer topic for a moment, Joe, you hinted at it there in your introduction. I was listening to an NFL fantasy podcast, because nerd, and they were discussing how this time of year is kind of their favorite because the season is over from a fantasy perspective. Now you can just think about what comes next and what if and all of the possibilities. It's all there to play for. Jeff, is this sort of the most enjoyable time of the year to cover Major League Soccer when it's all just rumors and transfers and the like?
I think so, because there's so much real estate to sort of see what you want to see in the plans, right? And you can look and say Josh Sargent and Georgi Mihailovic are teaming up in Toronto. Okay, what does that mean? Is it going to compare to the bygone? You can focus on past eras of Toronto. You can look at past two Americans trying to lead these clubs sort of issues, which is to say past iterations of Toronto. But you can also, I don't know, you can look at other teams like Houston bringing back Hector Herrera, and you have any number of reactions to that and feelings about the wisdom of that move, what that says about other things. There is so much, and frankly, so little evidence to prove you wrong, that I think that you can really start to build up a head of steam for some very ludicrous preseason predictions, which is really what the lifeblood of Major League Soccer and coaches talks once the season gets going. So this is where the magic happens, guys. This is where we're all figuring out that the Whitecaps will finish 15th in 2025 or whatever. So what could go wrong?
Nailed it.
Joe, I like that phrasing. You can see what you want to see. Joe, are you seeing predictions already coming together? Are you already starting your previews and your preseason thoughts?
I am, yeah. I've decided to get an early start on my 60,000-word opus that'll be divided into 30 teams that'll be dropping for Backfield next month.
Bless your heart.
It's it's honest work. I'm in the trenches. I'm working through it. Speaking of predictions, I already predicted for Backfield earlier this year. Sort of every new year, we do predictions for the USL, for MLS, and for the USMNT, the things we cover most over at Backfield. And one of my 10 predictions for MLS, because I did that column, was that the Houston Dynamo would finish on the bottom of the West. I'd already like to change that. I still am not sure that they're going to be great, but I think they've made some really nice floor-raising moves, and we will talk about some of those. Jeff mentioned Ache, which is not on my bingo card for them to bring Hector Herrera back this year.
Nope.
So now's a great time for predictions, but it's also a great time for walking them back, which I'm trying to do right now.
Any predictions for how things play out with Toronto FC this season, specifically their pursuit of Josh Sargent? At time of recording, and things may have changed already, Toronto have submitted around an $18 million bid to Norwich City. Josh Sargent withdrew from availability for Norwich's FA Cup game because he was focused on other matters, specifically transfer matters, according to Philippe Clement. Norwich have said that they will not be sanctioning a move. He will be staying with Norwich. There is no chance you can get him unless you pay a little bit more money. That seems to be the writing on the wall for me, is that Norwich recognize they maybe have a fish on the line, recognize that the season is not going swimmingly. I didn't mean to do two fish metaphors, but there we are. And that they do have other players already scoring goals and playing well for them. So this does feel like a moment in which they can keep the players that are playing well and then cash in on a relative asset. Joe, how do you see the things developing from here?
Yeah, first off, Norwich should have taken that offer from FC Cincinnati, which was, I believe, more than what Toronto FC have offered in this window. But maybe Sargent's production was worth it for them. I don't mind this move for Toronto. It's a lot of money. Let's be clear about that. It's a lot of money for a player that I don't know is quite worth that sum. But Toronto FC might think that he's worth it for them. And really, how much they spend doesn't matter here because he's going to be a designated player for them. So they could spend $40 million. It doesn't change their cap. All it changes is maybe ownership's future willingness to invest in the squad. But they've already lit money on fire. Like they've already lit euros on fire by those couple of Italians, and they've continued to invest in this team. So I don't think that's a huge issue. I think Sargent is absolutely worth a DP spot in Major League Soccer. That is my overarching take on all of this. And I think by acquiring him, Toronto will be a much, much more competitive team next year than they've been this year. And we can broaden it out and look at what Toronto have done over the last couple of transfer windows, and maybe we will before this conversation is out. But I would not hesitate to spend a designated player spot on Josh Sargent if I was Toronto FC, and that is exactly what they've done. He gives them another piece along with Georgi Mihailovic to actually threaten teams in the attack. And I know on this show, we've talked a good bit about how Sargent doesn't really seem to be that guy with the national team, and he hasn't been. I mean, he has not scored for the national team in a longer amount of time than Sebastian Soto has scored for the national team, and Sebastian Soto is a retired soccer player. So
and Ayo Akinola, too, and he's Canadian.
I think Uliana's as well, and I think he's just been abducted.
It's a cursed list, to your point.
Know. I think Uliana's in space somewhere. I don't really know what's going on with him. But really, Sargent has still been a productive championship striker. And if you're a productive championship striker, except for Latte Lot, by the way, I think you've got a good chance of being successful in MLS. So I don't mind this move for Toronto whatsoever. I don't know that I would have spent this money on Sargent in general, but would I spend a DP spot on him? Absolutely.
Jeff, agree or disagree? Do you feel like this is a player that they have been missing and will now utilize effectively?
I think it's a player MLS has been missing. And Joe already alluded to previous interest from FC Cincinnati. St. Louis City has also obviously been permanently linked as soon as the franchise was announced, just given, again, his status as being from Missouri, the crown jewel of the Midwest. And I think when you look at Norwich and where their project has been, this is a down year. They're in the relegation battle for the first time in a long time, and they had seen a path back to the Premier League with Josh Sargent leading the line. And so for the last few years, since Timo Pukki left for MLS, it should be said, and he also did struggle in Major League Soccer, another championship striker, granted at a very different point of his career at that point. But Josh Sargent kind of peaks in 23-24, and he's got 16 goals in the championship. He's taking his shots, in pretty prime striker territory, and right now he's off center. He's taking it about 2 yards further back than he was in the best day, and that just means that they're struggling to create the chances necessary. So they're probably not looking for a pressing forward, someone who can win headers, but also somebody who wants to be running more than just being a pure target guy. And I think generally in England, if you want to stay up, you just need to get physical, right? Like look at Sunderland this year, I guess, for want of a better situation. He's only got 7 goals this year. The question here with Toronto though is the fees just get so large, and I kind of cracked a joke last week about how the transfer market is so broken, and I understand right now you do set the valuation and you say he's an $18 million player for our purposes, Toronto, and so pay up or we're going to keep him. I feel like that's got to be able to get brought down a little bit here, because I think that you have to look, and he's not necessarily a young, like you're signing him with like sell on upside. He could be, but he turns 26 next month. Right? And so this is maybe the start of the point of the career where you're looking more at what is he going to do for us for the next 5 years, 6 years. And I think that he would be a very productive striker in Major League Soccer. I think that he could be with the correct sort of service, but he also is the type of striker who can generate his own shot and his own look, which does help. Lottie Loth, I think, is a very relevant sort of scenario to compare it to. Brandon Vasquez is another one from last year where you look and say, U.S. men's national team tax, that's the Vasquez of it all. Championship, how it translates over for a team that's hot but knows they don't have the profile of striker that's right for them to do what they want to do in the league. I think at that point, they're probably negotiating at the disadvantage. I think Toronto actually maybe has a stronger hold at this point. So, look, I know all of that's off-field right now, but he hasn't signed yet, right? So I just think it's a very interesting situation. Obviously, there are parallels as well to Josie Altidore, who had a lot less success in England and then came back to Toronto FC at a slightly later point of his career and then became a club legend. So that went well, but it's we'll see.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there is a part of me, and I know it's like different personnel, different people making decisions, but there was an element of like Giovinco was great, so let's just bring in Insigne, and another exciting Italian will be just as good, and that didn't go well. And like you said it earlier, to me there are shades of like Georgi Mihailovic and Josh Sargent equals Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore. Like, do we feel like this is a smart roll of the dice? Because I do feel like Josie Altidore, when he makes that move, did feel like much more of a slam dunk than this feels, which is an odd thing given the success and kind of track record Josh Sargent has had in Europe so far.
Well, let's compare Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore, who at that point were the most important player on the U.S. men's national team besides Clint Dempsey, was Michael Bradley. I think that they were 1-1 at that point, pretty much.
Same as Georgi Mihailovic. We all know that. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Josie Altidore had been the starting striker when healthy since 2009, 2008, right? So we're already talking about half a decade of being the guy for the men's national team. I think right now Mihailovic doesn't look like he'll be considered like in serious consideration for the World Cup roster, and Josh Sargent is a fringe contender for one of the backup striker spots right now. He has not been favored under Mauricio Pochettino. He has not scored since before the coronavirus pandemic lockdown for the U.S. men's national team. Like, I think that it isn't like for like, because right now we're just talking about lower profile players for the men's national team. And so I think that also looking at it, it shouldn't be viewed as sort of a World Cup marketing sort of factor, right? Like, you're not necessarily going and saying we're bringing them. This is like the Weston McKennie argument, right? The idea that if someone could quickly get Weston McKennie in, since Juventus wants to let him go, they would have one of the faces of the U.S. men's national team ahead of the World Cup, and that would be massive for the club, massive for the league, possibly definitely great for McKennie to be the guy who is always like available to just be a hop, skip, jump plane ride away from marketing opportunities, press conferences, whatever. I don't know if you really have that same potential with Sargent and Mihailovic, right? It could be more coherent, soccer-wise, certainly than the Italian experiment, right, when you're looking at Insigne and Bernardeschi. But, it is a very different sort of circumstance when you look at it compared to like an Altidore Bradley and their status at the time.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's Jason Hernandez, who's the chief soccer officer for Toronto FC, making these decisions. Jason Hernandez was a player on that 2017 Toronto FC team. He wasn't a decision-maker on that 2017 Toronto FC team, right? So we're in a totally different era. To me, this move and the Georgie move as well scream, let's go out and spend whatever we have to spend to make ourselves not suck anymore. I mean, like that's the story here. Toronto FC are bringing back the fewest percentage of minutes, the lowest percentage of minutes of any team in MLS. I think they're sub 50% in terms of minutes they're returning for 2026 based off of the roster moves that have been announced so far. That's from Elliot McKinley. Like, that is crazy low percentage. They are rebuilding this team, and it started back in the summer when they finally got out from underneath those two DP deals. They spent, Jeff, you and I talked about this for a long time, and when that Georgie move came down, they spent a lot of money on Georgie to acquire him from the Rapids. But you know what Georgie is? He's a known quantity. I know Josh Sargent hasn't played in MLS. The dude is a known quantity. He's going to be good in this league. I don't think he's going to be truly transcendent in this league. I don't think he's going to be bad in this league. He's going to be a good, useful, designated player in this league. And Toronto FC, I think their strategy of trying to raise their floor makes a ton of sense. They've been a joke. They've been an absolute joke for years now. And with the way the roster is being constructed as we speak, I don't think they're on track to be a joke in 2026. And I know that's not the end goal in MLS, but it's a step. All of a sudden, you've signed Walker Zimmerman this winter. You've added Georgi Mihailovic and Jose Cifuentes last summer. You've added Josh Sargent. Those are four players who could be very good MLS players. Maybe more than that, but somewhere in the range of good to very good. All of a sudden, you're looking like a team that could actually be a playoff team in a very competitive Eastern Conference. So I don't think the Josie, Bradley, Giovinco, this team's not going to be that. Like, that team is one of the greatest MLS teams of all time. They're one of the greatest North American soccer teams of all time. This team's not going to be anywhere near that category in 2026. But are they going to be better? You bet they are. And if I'm Jason Hernandez, that is the bar that I'm looking to overcome right now.
Joe, who would you rather be the focal point of your attack? Josie and Josh Sargent, or Cucho and our man Timo Werner?
Oh, wow. Okay, so Josie and Josh Sargent, Cucho and Timo Werner. That's an incredible question. One
I'm trying to picture how each of these work. It's not like for like.
I think I would lean Cucho and Timo. I think. Yeah, right. At least I think both of those partnerships could be filthy. So I'm kind of into both. But Cucho is just my favorite player of that bunch, so I'm gonna go with the second one.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, too, you let Cucho play the soccer stuff in the center of the field, and you have Timo running decoy runs down the left flank until he's tired. That works. That's fine. He tuckers himself out.
Yeah, I do think the thing that held me back there, just since we brought up Jozy Altidore, which is inevitable in this segment, Jozy's ability to link play has been criminally underrated throughout his entire career because he's such a big boy, but he is so smooth on the ball. And I do think a Josh Sargent strike partnership would do quite well in MLS with the right players underneath them and around them. But yeah, I'm still going Cucho and Timo.
What about Chicho and Timo?
No, I probably shifted back. I probably shifted back to Jozy and Josh. Good old American, hardened American strike partnership. Who says no?
Well, let's talk. Let's go way from the East Coast to the West Coast and move to San Jose, which is a thing that Timo Werner might well be doing, where he might well be playing with Chicho Arango up top in Bruce Arena's San Jose of the future. That's also
crazy.
San Jose of the past.
It is crazy.
Yeah, this is such a saucy one. This move, Timo Werner going from RB Leipzig to the San Jose Earthquakes. This was reported by The Athletic yesterday. It does certainly seem like this is trending towards happening. Werner has clearly been offered around MLS, right? I mean, he was offered to the New York Red Bulls. They couldn't come to a contract agreement last summer, which was hilarious.
They offer them, like, when one team in the multi-club ownership model offers them to the other team, is that like floated around the league, or is that more so asking yourself if you want to buy a thing from yourself?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. In that case, they wanted to buy a thing from themselves, but Timo Werner didn't want to come at a price that they wanted to buy from themselves. Nailed it. Makes sense. This move is epic. My reaction to this move was, you know what? Why not? Why not? Right? I mean, who's going to say no to this move? The San Jose Earthquakes hemorrhaged goal contributions.
Jeff will, apparently.
This winter. Yeah, Jeff just decided to dip out. They've hemorrhaged goal contributions this winter. Joseph Martinez has signed in Liga MX, and Cristian Espinoza has signed for Nashville, which we'll talk about later. And now all of a sudden there's a big old hole in the San Jose Earthquakes attack, which was the best part of their team last season. Can they replace that? Can they not? Well, they're going to try in Timo Werner. And I think between Werner and Arango, and also Preston Judd, by the way, who I think is a very, very good MLS player. He's certainly a starting level striker in this league, although it doesn't look like he's going to get starting minutes at this stage given the Werner acquisition. With those guys in the team, I think the Quakes attack could be very, very good. The thing that I'm curious about for San Jose, there's really two things. One, is Timo Werner still a player? Or is he kind of done? And we don't really know because he hasn't played soccer in years. But we do know that.
How dare you discount his 13 minutes this season or whatever?
My mistake. We do know that Timo Werner at his high was an elite Bundesliga player, right? And that's why he gets the move to Chelsea in the first place, and he's broken at Chelsea and things are too loud and everything goes wrong. But is he still a player? I would tend to think yes. At a player at his age with the experience that he's had, if he can stay healthy, which granted is an if, but I don't think he's so old that that's a massive concern. If he can stay healthy, I don't see how Timo Werner isn't torching in behind opposing MLS defenses. I just don't see that. The other question, though, beyond just is Werner that guy, is he worth a DP spot, is who's going to feed him the ball? Because Timo Werner is such an interesting player, guys. The fact that he scored, 23, 24 goals for RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga without being able to dribble the ball is wild. Like, you go through and look at his successful take-on numbers and you look at FBref. He doesn't dribble. He doesn't like to dribble. He's not good at it. He is a straight-line player who is either good at breaking in beyond the back line or arriving on the weak side of the box as that accent runner. So the question for San Jose then is, who's feeding him? If Werner's not going to create the chances for himself, who is going to be the one finding Timo Werner streaking in behind? Who's going to be the one playing that ball across so that he can crash as the accent runner? Cristian Espinoza would have been kind of a good pick for that, I think. But, we forget things sometimes, and he's no longer a San Jose Earthquakes player. Is it going to be Nico Sakiris, who I honestly forgot was on the San Jose roster, and that's my bad when I was thinking about this yesterday, but also shows us what Bruce Arena has done with Nico Sakiris, which is to say not played him after his injury. So who's going to feed Timo the Rock? Is it going to be Chicho Arango doing number 10-ish stuff, which he can do, but I don't know that that's ideal. I'm just wondering if there's one more shoe to drop for the Quakes. So have one more DP spot open with Hernan Lopez out on loan. Apparently they've recouped that DP spot. The Quakes could make one more move. And if they make one more move, Jeff, this team could be kind of scary.
Yeah, because right now when you look at that midfield, it sort of is a collection of those old kind of late 2010s, early 2020s Twitter U17 every touch compilations.
Yeah.
Like you've already mentioned Nico Sakiris. I'll throw in Cruz Medina and Noel Buck.
He's gone. Cruz Medina's gone. He's headed to
that's
Chivas.
Right.
Yep.
That's right. He's off to Chivas. And that could have maybe been interesting, but I think there's a point, and they're running into this with Sakiris. where if you don't get minutes to a promising prospect soon enough, and eventually at a certain point they're going to get bored and they're going to feel like their career's stagnating and they're going to need to make a move for the sake thereof, right? And so that one maybe isn't as much a surprise. I think Noel Buck, we're waiting to see, right? Like we're just waiting to see. There had always been so much potential estimated around him. Obviously England, kind of bandying with the U.S. to see who could have him in the future of their program. And, maybe this is a year where he bounces back with a little bit more of a settled footing, a full year, full preseason under Bruce. Ronaldo Vieira, though, obviously is going to be very crucial to make all of this work. And he came in and he was pretty immediately a steady, dependable number 6 in Major League Soccer. And I think that if you have one of those players, and if he can be that for 30 plus starts in the 2026 regular season, San Jose is going to have a lot easier time sort of figuring out everything in the final third, knowing that there is someone capably shielding the ball from getting into the danger zone. Because right now, they do still have some work to do in defense as well.
Yep.
And they do still have some work on their roster. I think Daniel's been their starter in goal for a few years now, for quite some time. And it just he's never been among even the most like steady but unspectacular sort of goalkeepers in Major League Soccer. He is error prone. And so do they look to improve there? There's potential, though. I think that you continue to look at this roster. You continue to look at just generally, I think that they've done very well to turn over also some of the players that weren't working for Matias Almeida and were working thereafter, who had sort of been around still because they were on such long-term contracts. And I think maybe there is flexibility. They will hope that there is flexibility to be able to go ahead and push on and not just be challenging for 8-9 again like they were last year, but maybe actually get into the bona fide playoff places.
Yeah, and I do think the Quakes need one more piece to actually push on from where they were last year. I think it's possible, as the roster is constructed, that they're as good as they were last year, but they haven't made progress. Like, I mean, if you gave me the choice between Espinoza and Werner, I'm taking Espinoza 10 times out of 10. He's a known quantity in MLS, and I think the ceiling for Werner is probably Espinoza in this league, as weird as that kind of sounds. Maybe his ceiling's a little bit higher, but I would take the known quantity and maybe a tiny bit lower ceiling for Cristian Espinoza over Timo Werner every day of the week. And so now, effectively, what you've done is you're hoping that Preston Judd can be Joseph Martinez. You're hoping that Timo Werner can be Cristian Espinoza. And you're probably hoping that your rookie center backs you gave a bunch of minutes to last year enjoy the Bruce Arena experience, and all of a sudden they're like borderline best 11 players, right? And that seems possible, that they'll have some native defensive improvement in their roster. I'm also a Daniel guy, by the way. I think he is a very good goalkeeper in MLS. But regardless of any of that stuff, I think you still need one more piece to actually step forward. Maybe you've taken a half step forward, or maybe you've taken a half step back this offseason. I don't think you've meaningfully changed where you are. I do have to wonder if the Quakes are going to do one more thing, because they think that with Chicho and with Werner, their window to win is now, right? And why wouldn't they think that? They should think that the West is theirs if they can maybe snag a home playoff spot and then have a nice little run and go from there. I think their window is open if they push this winter.
All right, on that note, we're going to take a quick break to hear from some sponsors and for the TSS Discord to have the opportunity to post Joe's I'm a Daniel guy out of context line. I look forward to that from Joe Lowry and from the Discord. We'll be back soon to talk some more MLS moves. Welcome back, everybody. We've been talking plucky upstarts strengthening their rosters so they can be more competitive, and let's continue to do so by talking Inter Miami. My goodness. This is like the biplane in Independence Day, if like that was your Air Force, and then like you're trying to strengthen it and like fix the hull and patch the wing, and then your opposition has the Independence Day ship or like an F-14. I don't know what Inter Miami doing. I don't know how they're doing it, Joe, but they've added some pieces. They're still pretty strong.
Yeah, this Miami offseason has been incredible. Like this has been one of the best offseasons in MLS history. Now there still are some questions about Miami, and I think about, like, are they really getting better at left back? Are they really going to be able to replace the progression that Sergio Busquets brought in central midfield now that those guys are gone? But man, this offseason has been absolutely unbelievable. And some of these moves we talked about already, but some of them are new. Dane St. Clair joining in goal is an obvious upgrade over 3/4 of a season of Oscar Ustari and 1/4 of a season of Rocco Rios Novo. I mean, that is just the biggest no-brainer of all time. Then you look up a line, and we haven't talked about this move yet, but Mikael is joining from Palmeiras. This is former Houston Dynamo center back Mikael, who was amazing for the Dynamo. He really developed into an elite MLS player, borderline best 11 sort of center back. He's left-footed. He can play on the left side of that back too. And when we talked in MLS Cup about the chaos that is Maxi Falcone, I do think we all sort of had a mind to, well, Miami might need a little bit of an upgrade in that part of the field, and they've gotten that. That's no joke. Since we recorded last, they've made 2 other moves that have been public. One other move that's been official, one other move that's been reported. One of those is trading $2 million to the Portland Timbers to acquire David Ashala, who is going to be in contention to start for them in defensive midfield. An entirely different profile to Sergio Busquets. Like, they're very, very different players. Ajala is much more of a roaming physical presence, which makes sense why he went to the Timbers in the first place. And Busquets is exactly who we know him to be. The last move that they've made so far, according to reports, is bringing Tadio Allende back on a non-DP deal. Now, this contract we haven't seen yet, and this I don't know exactly how they're going to maneuver, but it sounds like they're bringing Tadio Allende back from Celta Vigo on a non-DP contract. This is Tadio Allende, who set the postseason, I should say, scoring record in Major League Soccer. He was electric in that front three of Messi centrally, Silvetti on the left, Allende on the right. Was really, really good last year. At the moment, this Miami team looks filthy good. And the scariest part, guys, is that they probably can still make 2 big moves, two starting level moves. One is a designated player, should they get out from one of their U22s. Right now they've got 4 U22s. I imagine Tomas Aviles is going to go the way of Fede Redondo, and that's not going to be a huge problem. And they're going to have that DP spot to open. The other is they have real interest, I know this for a fact, in Tristan Blackman from the Vancouver Whitecaps, and this all bubbled over into the public, and Axel Schuster came out with a statement that says, no, this isn't happening. We want to keep Tristan Blackman. Miami's interest is real. So whether it's Blackman or another center back from MLS or from somewhere else, I would expect them to sign another center back before the season starts. This team is filthy. I'm not 100% sure if they're going to be better than they were last year. I'm just like 80% sure they're going to be better than they were last year.
What kind of a deal do you think it would take to get Blackman?
Well, Jeff, do you remember what the reporting was? That they put together like a $3 million offer for him or something along those lines?
Yeah.
I don't think that's probably terribly far off. Yeah.
Right. They had the money. It was one of those where it was like it could be amortized in such a way where he could be a TAM player.
Exactly.
Even if they had that fee, so long as the contract length, which I think it was, right? Yeah, I mean, like, look, on the one hand, I commend them, right? I think that they're doing what they were so averse to doing with the squad build for 23 and 24, which is look for players who have done well in Major League Soccer. And that's where Ajala and Mikhail, certainly come in, right? And you've seen them succeed in tougher situations, right? On worse teams, on teams that have been lower in the table, or in Houston, a very different sort of game model at their best even. And now you can plug them into situations. And Dane St. Clair, of course, as well with Minnesota, right? And bringing him in as well. Those are 3 players now who have played in the Western Conference, who have played really difficult sort of games and will be very happy to do thankless stuff on the field, especially when you're talking about the field players, who then are freeing up Messi and others to be able to do more of the luxury sort of ball sort of stuff. And that's when Miami's at its best, when you just don't need your luxury players to be doing non-luxury tasks. They're not peasants. On the flip side, though, I think narratively it's incredibly boring. I think this offseason has been, it's just like, sure, of course they can afford it. Of course they can figure it out. Because with Major League Soccer, its parity isn't just a selling point because every week you could see any sort of matchup finish in a 1-1 draw, right? Like, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about MLS's parity, right? We're talking about the fact that because of the constraints of these rules, which I agree are dated, right? I think, I make no mistake, it's still like salary cap is too small. Some of these rules are too limiting to really be able to foster much competition in certain teams if you aren't able to recruit. And it's what MLS has become. Throw in the fact there's a strong players union as well that does tend to have line go up sort of salary interest, and so they're never really looking to take cuts. Well, now we're into a point now where players are taking cuts. It is on the record now that players like Dane St. Clair are taking a lot less money to go play for Miami than they are for other clubs, right? And that's great. They can choose that for their career. It's probably better for him ahead of the World Cup, frankly, to be taking shots against Messi every single day, right? Or facing shots. He shouldn't take the shots. He should, actually. Dane St. Clair should shoot with Lionel Messi in goal every single day, and he'll be better at the World Cup because he'll have humiliated Messi.
I mean, Dane St. Clair probably took more free kicks last year than Messi did. That's all I'm saying.
Jesse, are you listening? Yeah. Jesse, come on. You got to make this happen. No, but I think that the flip side is now you're not having to see a team sacrifice ever because players are taking the sacrifices for them. And so now you're able to cobble together any roster you want to, and there's no competitive balance there. I don't know. I just like it feels like an inevitability, and I'm sure Miami is going to set records this year. I think that they look equipped to shatter the points record at present, right? I just like it isn't as interesting to me as the rest of the league right now. It really isn't.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, you were talking earlier about like maybe there's concerns about Jordi Alba in the left back spot, like not a Reguilón believer then, but like still that seems like a pretty big signing, a pretty smart signing as well. and one that will do the business for them and would be a good starter for pretty much every other team in the league. So it feels like there are not a ton of vulnerabilities to this team that I can spot.
No, I don't think there's any massive vulnerabilities. I think there are. We're looking at Miami through the lens of how many trophies are they going to win, not are they going to win a trophy, I suppose, is where I come at this.
Yeah,
I mean,
fair.
Jordi Alba, I don't think we talked enough about how good of an attacker Jordi Alba was because we were all too busy laughing at his defensive work or lack thereof, right? Which was appropriate. But I mean, I have a legitimate question about how Reguilon fits in that spot and exactly how much production is lost on the attacking end, especially when it doesn't seem like, although I could be wrong, that they're going to bring in another attacking DP. If I had to guess, I would imagine that DP spot's going to be used on a central midfielder, and you're going to have Messi, DePaul, and one more sort of as those players. I'm really interested in all this, actually, by Jeff saying that he's not interested in this offseason. I'm just going to use the word interested a billion times. I think Miami's offseason has been fascinating, and I think for the league as a whole, it's fascinating.
Would you say it's been fascinating
Interesting?
or interesting?
Interesting? Yeah, I was trying to pull out my thesaurus and alternate to the one other word that I know that's a synonym for that word. I think Miami pushing the envelope is interesting, fascinating. I need to retire.
You're doing great, Joe.
I'm intrigued by what's going on in Miami, and I'm surprised that nobody else is, I suppose. I mean, there have been a lot of complaints about Miami and their roster build and how they're doing all this. It's not hard to figure out how they're doing all this. Like, players have taken discounts to play with Messi, and they have a bunch of allocation money stocked up because the Revs paid them $3 million in GAM for Leo Campana, which is hilarious. And they sold Diego Gomez to Brighton and fully restocked their GAM coffers in that way as well. Cap-wise, they're in a really healthy spot. They're in a really, really healthy spot. I want to see how good this team can be. To be totally honest, I know fans aren't going to like that. I want to see what Miami can be, and I suspect that by the time this machine is fully built, they're going to look like the best team we've ever seen in MLS.
Do you really feel like there's not interest in what they're doing and how they're doing?
Well, Jeff, I suppose just from you two. It didn't, Taylor, every time we talk about
No.
Miami, you sort of bring it up with a sigh, and Jeff said he wasn't interested, so I'm one of three.
No. It's less that. I think it's more like the resignation and the obviousness of like how strong this team is going to be. To the point of parity, if you're looking at this league as you never know who's going to win, you certainly have favorites. You certainly have teams that seem better positioned to be able to challenge and to be able to make that run in the regular season and then into MLS Cup. Inter Miami just don't seem to have any vulnerabilities in my mind. I mean, they have a few, and like I'm not saying that critically. I'm saying it's more of a like fatigue almost. I think that like we've talked about them so much, we've heard about them so much, and that was with them trying to figure out how to make all of these disparate pieces come together and work, and they did. And then they got rid of some of those disparate pieces and added in very functional pieces in my mind.
Right.
It just feels like there's no drama there. They're just going to be comprehensively good. I mean, you said it really well, Joe. It's not will they win, it's how many will they win. You don't ask how, you ask how many. That feels like what this season is going to be for Inter Miami.
No, I mean, I agree, because I agree with myself, certainly. It just seems like we can't have both of these things. We can't have, MLS needs to help their teams be more ambitious and do more interesting things, and then also when these things happen, say that they're boring. Like, what
That's
what
not
do
what
we
we're
want?
talking about here, though.
What are we talking about?
That's not what
then?
we're talking about at all, Joe. We're talking about the fact that the league has long been calibrated where you have to make certain trade-offs to be able to make this work, right? The idea is that generally you need to, with the cap, with the designated player rule, with the international slots, with the home grow rules, with how this whole thing is structured right now, you have to make certain trade-offs. You have to say, I'm willing to go all in on this area of the field, sacrifice this area. If you're an MLS team, that's your defense. You've noticed that, I can tell. You make these trade-offs and you say, this is how it's going to be better. We're going to be setting up with our 3 DPs as a winger, a number 10, and a striker. Okay, cool. Well, we're not going to have a lot of calibration in the midfield either, by the way, so we're going to need to be really good in transition. Okay, got it. Well, we're doing it with central midfielders. Okay, well, now maybe we're making trade-offs in the final third, right? And the idea is also that because of limits, senior maximum, TAM, these sorts of things, when good teams are good, they fall apart immediately. And it kind of happened with Miami, right? They did have to make a lot of turnover, but you look at the Galaxy example from last year, it's the most dramatic. And let's even go with the Philadelphia Union since they made MLS Cup in 2022, right? It was a gradual deconstruction of that thing because they could no longer afford to have all of the players that were on that squad. And so then how do you replace it? Because it's just life in Major League Soccer. It's something the players have gotten really used to. Miami isn't playing by those rules right now. They don't have to worry about that because they can just go in and say, oh yeah, okay, Drake Callender, we're going to bench you, we're going to trade you, and we're not even going to worry about it because in a year we can get whoever wins goalkeeper of the year, right? It's these sorts of things where it's just they're operating in a very different sort of reality where it isn't even the old discussion of small market versus big market market, which is why is every great player wanting to go to LA or Atlanta or Miami or New York, and the rest of the league is struggling, right? Okay, well then you get your Cincinnatis and your Columbuses, who find a way to have really stable ownership, really good stadiums, and able to build genuinely great teams in spite of not being in one of the global cities of the United States, right? You also have the Chicago Fire fumbling every opportunity despite being one of the global markets, right? This is where the interest is to me in Major League Soccer. And so the idea now that you can reach the pinnacle and you don't even have to worry about a fall off because you can just get whichever player you want to take a pay cut, that's just less fun to me. That's all. It's not about not raising the level of Major League Soccer. It's that they're not really doing this like Major League Soccer that we've seen before. And that's less interesting to me.
I hear what you're saying, Jeff, I suppose, but it does seem maybe that there are like MLS-y ways that Miami have done this, right? You talked about the Drake calendar trade. They've generated, how is this not MLS-y? They've generated an absurd amount of allocation money through various player trades and transfers abroad, which restocks your allocation money coffers, which is hilariously MLS. I don't know, like you can go back through and trace where the allocation money comes from. I understand there's only one Messi, and I understand that he's not going to Salt Lake. And I understand that having Messi affords Miami opportunities that the other teams in MLS aren't afforded as constructed, right? I think we all agree with that. No other team's going to be able to pull off the DePaul deal and somehow get Atletico Madrid to defer a $20+ million payment to like 6 months later, right? That just, no other team's going to be able to do that. So those arguments I'm sympathetic to, but I mean, how Miami have assembled their cap space is not, it's not really, I mean, it's complicated because MLS rules are complicated, but within that lens, it's not super complicated, and I think it's perfectly MLS-y. So I think the Galaxy are fresh in our minds as an MLS Cup team that went for it and had to deconstruct. The Galaxy's cap situation was in hell, right? I mean, like they went all in on Marco Reus that summer to go and try to win MLS Cup, and it ended up working out, not because of Marco Reus, but it ended up working out.
In spite of Marco Reus.
They were already in a bad cap situation, and Will Kuntz had tried to sort of fix that team on the fly, and then realized, oh crap, we can go win this thing. We have to accelerate, not put our foot on the brake. Miami's situation is just different than that. And the number of teams that have had to do what the Galaxy did and the way that the Galaxy have had to do it, I think is quite low. So I don't know. Different strokes for different folks, right? I mean, this is all good. I'm not trying to tell anybody here what to like or what to enjoy. Personally, I find what Miami have done in the past to create the opportunity for them to be in the present and assemble what is going to be probably the flashiest MLS roster that we've ever seen, ever. I'm intrigued.
Joe, I hope this will make sense. There's a podcast I really like called Blank Check. I've talked about it before, and they break down directors' filmographies. And they were talking about the Rise of Skywalker, the most recent Star Wars film. And they were basically saying that like the fandom online has become so toxic and so embittered towards like this director, that director, that like I think the host said like I don't even have interest in discussing why I hate this movie because so many people have hated other movies in this franchise that I'm almost like tired of now feeling like I'm one of those people. And I think where I'm at with that in mind is like I'm like slightly Miami fatigued, and now they've made themselves really intriguing and really strong, and I'm sort of like now you guys have done it. Now I have to.
Somehow Miami returned.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Taylor, can I ask a question on the back of that? Because I think that's really interesting, and I'm sympathetic to that. To be totally honest, what you've just described is how I feel about talking about the Premier League. Like, I mean, so here's my question.
There's 20 teams there, I guess. That's the difference, right?
That's not very MLS-y.
That's not very MLS-y. So, but here's my question. We do sort of talk about MLS as, well, when is the league going to loosen the roster restrictions?
Oh, yeah.
Like, when are they going to allow 6 or so teams with the most ambitious owners, Atlanta and Miami and Chicago, whoever else, right, the LA teams, when are they going to allow those teams to go for it? And what we're saying when we say that is we want MLS to be more structured like the Premier League, where there are favorites and there are dark horses and there are teams that we know probably aren't going to be very good, right? That to one degree or another, that's what we're saying. What's the issue there for you, Taylor? Because I know you enjoy the Premier League, and I recognize that the quality of MLS, even within that narrative framework, is lower, and it's going to be lower for decades and decades and decades, maybe forever. Is that the problem, or is there some other narrative problem here as you see it?
No, so I think, first of all, I am going to enjoy watching Inter Miami. I will probably watch more of them this year than I watched last year. Where I am concerned and slightly frustrated is not with them. I mean, other than that, they are so obviously being yeah, we're going to get better. What are you going to do about it? And it seems like the league's response to that has generally been, like wait till Messi isn't there anymore, and then we'll see if we can.
And by the league, you mean the other 29 teams?
That's what I mean. Yes. And I think that is it in a nutshell for me. It's just a feeling that no one is trying to knock them off. When the Heat assemble that trio, and then all of the players take cut rate deals to go play with them, when it's Bosh, LeBron, and Wade, when I was still watching the NBA, like it feels like there was that first season where I think they don't win the title, but
no,
like
they don't.
there is. I feel like there are teams that try to assemble teams to beat them and challenge them and find ways to build their own superstar teams and their own role player team. And I'm not sure we're seeing that. And I think like some of that is because the Galaxy are in the state they're in. Some of that has been LAFC being in a weird identity crisis of sorts. Like maybe there's a team that will end up doing that. But it feels for me like the league is much more, like the rest of the teams in the league are much more inclined to wait it out, let Miami win their titles, and then be able to say, like, well, yeah, anybody could do that with Messi and co. But now that you don't have that, what are you going to do? And then they'll kind of push on. And I think that's it, is that it's not like forcing challenge. It's not like bringing about natural opposition. It feels like everyone is sort of just keeping their powder dry for the time being. Maybe that is an oversimplification. It probably is, because I'm not an MLS expert the way you two are. But I think that is where my consternation and frustration is rooted.
I'm not sure I would say it is an oversimplification. I think that there's exactly one team I would look at this offseason, and every move they make, I'm like, they're going for Miami. And we'll get to them in segment 3. They're in the notes. Okay, That's exciting. But I think for the rest of the league, you're right. We are seeing some turnover phases when you look at like Chicago last year. I mean, they needed to start that anyway. They weren't going from contender class. But you look at Columbus now, is going to have to probably recalibrate a little bit under its new head coach. And you mentioned the Galaxy, LAFC, of course, with a new coach of their own right. Atlanta is still trying to remember where they left the good soccer. And they're hoping that it was just in Tata Martino's gym bag the whole time, right? It is a very weird balance here, because to like put a bow on it, the league's ecosystem hasn't changed. Other clubs are not benefiting from the way that Miami is able to make these, right? I think that, you referenced the Heatles, and my sort of brain actually went even further back to when A-Rod was trying to sign with the Red Sox, and the players union stepped in and was like, we can't let you take a cut rate, because if you're taking a cut rate, what does that mean for a mediocre shortstop? Right? Who suddenly, okay, well, if A-Rod's willing to go for this, the market goes down. And so in an interesting way, like MLSPA is endorsing some of these sorts of questions now about what is it worth to be the best goalkeeper in Major League Soccer? What is it worth to be, a really good young midfielder in Major League Soccer, right? They're kind of willing to make some of these changes. So I would say in a way, actually, players are losing some strength with what Miami is doing right now at a macro level. But that's probably a much longer discussion that I didn't bring notes for today. It's just... We're talking about it, but we're not talking about it in MLS terms, right? And I think that right now when we come up with segments for the other 29 teams, they all feel so unrecognizable from the discussions that we can do and need to have about Inter Miami. And maybe that's where the fatigue comes in here. We're at a time when people are fatigued by IPs. People don't want to see men in suits lifting trophies before players, or 2 of 3 people or whatever. Like, I think it's a situation here where maybe it's more reminiscent of other things that are going on in other parts of the world than people want to admit.
Hashtag let Maxi Falcone fly, baby. Let him fly.
That's right.
Don't take his minutes. Let him fly.
Honestly, though.
Like, speaking of IP fatigue, like the quote I was trying to remember and failing is, I think Vision in the Avengers has the line, like, our very strength, like, invites opposition. And it feels like with Inter Miami, like if that were the Marvel universe, it'd be like our very strength invites everybody to wait until we're not the Avengers anymore. And like once we get to Phase 4, it won't be as good, and then other villains can come along and kind of take over. But for now, we're going to bide our time. That feels like where we are. It also feels like we've gone plenty long on the Inter Miami segment, which is not what it was planned to be, but it's what it became. We're going to take one more break. We'll come back and talk about many other teams, including one that Jeff says is challenging. Inter Miami. Intriguing. Fascinating. Joe would say interesting. Back soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show, everybody. In the last segment, Jeff Ruder teased the team that he thinks could be building a squad to challenge, to like be the villains of the MCU, to challenge Inter Miami, who themselves are the villains. It gets confusing. Jeff, take it away.
So there are basically 2 theories when you see Cristian Espinoza show up in the Nashville Predators game. And they introduce him as only MLS All-Star Cristian Espinoza on the Jumbotron. you could say that he has really fallen for hockey. And for whatever reason, he cannot get with the Sharks. And he has always had this... That's the San Jose team, right? I'm like the least hockey literate Minnesota sports writer in the state's history. And then you have the Predators over there. Or he's about to sign with Nashville SC, which is actually what's going to be happening. And it is exciting to see what Nashville is doing. To go to the point of, like, what are the trade-offs they're making? Nashville, of course, is finally turning the page on kind of its initial squad. Like, in total. Yes, there are still some players who are there, right? Like Joe Willis re-up, for example. But Walker Zimmerman is gone. And Walker Zimmerman was sort of the statement piece of their first offseason. Like, the one that we paid attention to more than Hani Mukhtar, for example, right? And he took half a season maybe to get going, whereas Walker was sort of the, like, okay, so they want to have fundamental soccer, like when they signed him and Dax McCarty. You bring in Espinoza, and I think, first of all, it's going to do wonders for Cristian Espinoza, right? Because I think that now he will have dependable targets in the center of the box that he never really had for more than 1 year at a time in San Jose. When you look at Sam Surridge, assuming he sticks around for the full season, there's already some talk that maybe some team in England is going to want to bring him back, right? And that makes sense for homegrown quotas if they get to Europe, but he's probably not a European-level player, so we'll see where they go with that. Hani Mukhtar, of course, still is Hani Mukhtar and still doing Hani Mukhtar things. I think Espinoza could have a lot of assists there. He's also going to provide some really needed width because right now teams, since Gary Smith was head coach, and even under Callahan, have kind of known that they can keep it pretty narrow and compact in the defensive third against Nashville. And I think Espinoza will force them to stretch out, which will only create more space for Mukhtar and Surridge, which I think is very exciting. But like we went over this very well during the playoff series where they were just... You know, like, I think at this point now, it's like they played 4 games in a row against Miami to close their season, right? And they won one of them, obviously, because they forced a game 3, if I remember right. But, like, it still was sort of this resignation of Nashville is building to be very competitive, but they are not able to compete with Miami. And I think that when you bring in someone like Cristian Espinoza, you're saying, you know what, we're going for it. This is where the goals are. This is how you're able to break down. It makes sense to focus on the attack because of the deficiencies of Miami in defense compared to the rest, right? I just think that there's always been this exciting culture that's been brewing since BJ Callahan took over, especially. I think that there's been reason for optimism with Nashville, including on the field when you looked at how they were playing down the stretch last year before they ran into that junket. And man, it's just, I think it was a no-brainer for them. I think that Nashville was probably as trophy adjacent as like a team that could have viably afforded to bring in Espinoza was. So I think also a really good move for him. I'm excited. I don't know. I just like, this is what I talk about when I say like MLS teams having to make certain trade-offs. Now they're taking maybe a little bit of a hit on the defense, though they will feel that they're very fortified with 4 or 5 solid center backs on the roster already. And so now they're going ahead and taking this swing. And that's a big evolution for Nashville.
I love this move for them. And I think it's a reminder about how far Nashville has come. And Jeff, you kind of talked about this a little bit under BJ Callahan. But Nashville is now a place where a highly prized MLS free agent who had options in Cristian Espinoza. There were other teams that were willing, at least one other team that was willing to give him a DP deal that had options, and he chose to go to Nashville. And this is the first time in Nashville's existence as a club where we could say that. So I think that is a huge, huge positive for Nashville that they are now a destination. I sort of think about this as similarly to when Miles Robinson went to Cincinnati as a free agent, and it became clear, okay, this club has been reborn, and it's now a place where players want to go and think they can win. And Espinoza thinks he can win in Nashville. And I think he's right about that. This team's fresh off of an Open Cup win. They're fresh off of pushing Miami a little bit in that first series in the postseason. Jeff, you referenced that as well. And then there's the tactical fit, which is just awesome. Like getting another skillful possession player who works really hard in defense on the right side for BJ Callahan is such a delight. Nashville's number one issue heading into this offseason was, can we improve in that attacking midfield line of our 4-2-2? We have Hani and Surridge up top. Can we get one more piece that's not a Jacob Schaffelberg or an Alex Mule or a Quassam or a Jonathan Perez? Can we get somebody better than that? And they got somebody better than that. They moved Schaffelberg sort of along the way, but they got somebody better than that. And I think it's clear that Nashville have gotten better this winter. At least it sure seems that way to me. MLS is a funny league where saying things like this in January has a way of coming back to bite you. But right now, and I was talking about this with somebody inside the league the other day, it feels like it is Miami 1 in the East, it is Nashville 2, and then there's a question mark. And that's a legitimate credit to Nashville, because as we just spent the whole last segment talking about, getting that close to Miami is not easy to do, and I very much think they've done it this winter.
DC United like 4th?
Yeah. DC, Montreal, right up in that same territory, no doubt.
What would be the area of vulnerability for Nashville, either of you may take this one, that like if they were to address with a veteran MLSer who is like quite good, solidly good, you would feel much better about? What's the area that you want them to strengthen just a little bit more?
Yeah,
Jeff. If they could like time machine 2020 Dax McCarty right back onto this team, I think they'd do it in a heartbeat. Like, I think that just having that sort of line-breaking midfielder, like Eddie Tagseth had a really sort of emergent first half of the season, kind of faded a bit in the back half of the year. And I think that when you look at the rest of the roster, like you could maybe say left back, you could say goalkeeper, right? They're kind of doing an open competition sort of style with Joe Willis as the incumbent and the veteran, and then I don't know.
Brian Shayway is the gentleman's name.
Thank you is kind of the heir apparent, right? And so now it's going to be a question: is Brian the guy, or are you going to be bringing in someone from the outside, right? And
Brian Shayway is not his name; it's Brian Schwacke. My bad. Almost.
I'm so glad I called him Brian.
Yeah, Brian. You did good, Jeff. I did bad. Thank you.
I went with the safe pick there. I just think in midfield, Andy Nahar, I think is a fantastic option out on the right. That Nahar Espinoza right side is like,
it's going to feed families, man. It's going to feed families.
It is, and it's going to require a lot of overlapping coverage from the midfield and the defense. But I'm very excited to see it work, and I think that's where someone like McCarty comes in because he can do that sort of screening. He could drift out to the right side. He could break those lines. If the ball recirculates, gets to him, he can immediately send it back up. Someone who's a good channel distributor, I think, would be really useful for them.
So Jeff feeling optimistic about Nashville. Jeff, how are you feeling about your favorite, beloved club in the world, Minnesota United, losing Eric Ramsay but bringing in a new coach?
Not surprised, right? I think that's just been kind of the tale of their offseason is that the boom ball has sort of taken its effect on those who boomed the ball, right? And that there were some people who wanted to play more soccer things when you look at Robin Lod going to Chicago. And I think with Ramsay, like, this isn't the style he wants to be associated with, right? And that's something that I'd been saying on the pod, I think, all of last year, was that eventually they wanted to move to a possession model, and they just never got the players to do it. It looks like, if you're being generous, a lateral move in his career, but I think that at this point now he is going to be able to start fresh, clean slate. Yes, you're going to have to do some of those boom ball principles to keep West Brom, which have had a really tough festive period and have dropped from the mid-table to, I think, 7 points ahead of Norwich for the last relegation spot. So they're trying to make sure that the rot stops, and someone who's good at coaching set pieces, or someone who's good at building around set pieces and defending, is generally going to be a really good idea out there. And it's just a chance for him, again, to build a different sort of reputation and then try to find the jobs that, he wants thereafter. And I think that he will be excited about West Brom was in the Prem like a decade ago. So at least there was some sort of upside there at the Hawthorns. Cam Knowles, is appointed, and Cam Knowles was the interim coach at the start of 24 between Adrian Heath and Eric Ramsay. He went unbeaten in 5, if I recall. I think 3 or 4 wins and a draw or 2. They played much more expansive and wide open. It looked like a team that was kind of like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at the start of his Man U tenure, where it was just sort of like roll the ball out, have some fun with it, right? And we'll try to get the system down. But they were working on the defense, and so the idea was that the attack needed to be a little bit more free flowing. And fans responded really well to it. They posted a video of him getting announced in the locker room, clapped and did the bro hugs galore and everything. And I think generally the locker room has always really liked Cam Knowles. He was first hired as the next pro head coach and has worked his way up too. So that's another validation of that pathway for clubs to be able to not just develop players in next pro, but also some coaches. And yeah, they still have a lot of work to do with their roster. So yeah, Knowles isn't scoring the goals, but he should probably enable them to score more during the run of play than Ramsay was.
I think that would be ideal. And I put this out when Ramsay moved on. I'd be surprised if Minnesota didn't have some sort of tactical evolution. Now, that's not to say it's going to be a big one, but I do think we're going to see them become a little bit more possession oriented this year. And I think they've got the pieces to do that between Gressel and Carlos Harvey and Jefferson Diaz, and Triantis looks like an amazing player, to be honest. I think he's really, really good, to the point where Minnesota might have a hard time keeping him around for more than like one more transfer window. Will Trapp's a guy that's played with the ball for years, right? I mean, he played with Greg Berhalter for a century. Joaquin Pereira can do a bunch of that on-ball stuff. We don't really know what you're getting out of Dominic Fitz, who arrived last summer, but he's a guy who sort of has the rep of being able to do some things on the ball, and from what I've seen, I think that's true. So there's some pieces there to become a bit more possession-oriented. The other thing that I think is interesting about the Knowles appointment following Ramsay, and Ramsay's move, by the way, is like a real affirmation of his decision in the first place, it seems anyway, to come to MLS from Manchester United hoping to get a job that he wanted, that he viewed as a higher level than Minnesota, and he wouldn't have taken the West Brom job if he didn't think that was the case. So I think it all worked out great for Eric Ramsay, and I think it's probably good for MLS to have another coach going to Europe and having a chance to show himself, especially in the recent aftermath of the Celtic incident. On Cam Knowles, for me, this is just a reminder, and this is Minnesota United advancing their front office control, right? Where we talked about this at LAFC and John Thornton, where you promote from within because you don't want to upset the apple cart. And the apple cart for Minnesota right now is that the front office has a lot of control relative to the manager when it comes to transfers, and more so that their ratio of front office to managerial control is higher than most teams in MLS. Like Atlanta is maybe at the other end of the spectrum right now, or at least it might seem that way, where all of a sudden all the players Atlanta United are signing are former Newell's Old Boy or like Argentine or have played in the Argentine top flight in one form or another. Which is not to say that Chris Henderson isn't involved there, but it sure seems like Tata Martino has had a big say in some of the moves that have been made in Atlanta since he showed up. I think Minnesota are on the other side of that, and I'm just kind of curious to see how that all plays out.
Final team to be mentioned, as briefly as you all like. I would like to talk Houston for a moment, who themselves are making some moves, including potentially Mateusz Bogusz. By all accounts, Tata Martino and Atlanta very interested in him, but Houston in negotiations, tabling offers, Fabrizio Romano tweeting things, Xing things. I forget where we are on that front. What do we think, gentlemen? How are we feeling about Houston?
Yeah, I mean, Bogusz he's a good player in MLS. We've seen that with LAFC even before he kind of went supernova for them and earned LAFC some money on the back of his move to Cruz Azul. He was a useful MLS player, and I think he'll absolutely be that at a minimum in Houston. The Cruz Azul time didn't go very well for Bogusz, where he really wasn't rated or wasn't good enough to be a regular player for them. And so now Cruz Azul are trying to get out of the deal, and they have the money to be able to take a little bit of a loss on the fee. But from the reports, it sure sounds like the Dynamo are going to be paying $6-7 million to get Bogusz from Cruz Azul. I'm a bit torn on what's happening in Houston right now, because on one hand, I think they have raised their floor this offseason. They have made a ton of changes. I think they're in the top 5 of teams who've moved on from the most minutes from last year to this year. So they are chopping and changing galore. And I think they are getting better, right? Where last year they straight up weren't a good team in a bad Western Conference. Bogusz helps them get there. I have no idea if Guilherme, the Brazilian that they've officially now signed as a DP, is going to help them get there. But they've also added a new center back. They've also added another defensive midfielder, and they've also added Hector Herrera. They've added what looked to me to be reasonable, like starting or rotation level players, and that's exactly what they needed. That's true on one hand, where I think the Dynamo have raised their floor from last year. The other part of this is, I don't know, Jeff, does an Ezequiel Ponce, Mateusz Bogusz, and Guilherme DP trio really do anything for you? I'll be honest. It doesn't do jack squat for me.
Yes,
like it does basically nothing for me.
It does a lot for my Scrabble board. So
Ooh, good point. Bogusz is great for Scrabble.
No proper names.
Okay, if we did an MLS
Philistines?
Scrabble, Taylor, have a little
you.
creativity.
they're not philosophers. They're soccer players. How proper are they? Look, I think that the other thing to keep in mind is and this is also the case with Hector Herrera, right? Like when he went back to Toluca, he was rotational, right? Like he was starting fewer games than he came off the bench, right? For over the course of 12 months now, and so. If you're generous, you're saying that's the physicality of Liga MX, where every player can be a TAM player if they want to be salary-wise. And so, the standard is higher, and so therefore he just couldn't run at that rate. And being, sort of the focal point in a Ben Olsen system, maybe that was better for where he's at this stage in his career. So maybe there is a chance that you actually will see something closer to a best 11 caliber Hector Herrera, which we saw in, I think it was 23 and 24. Certainly 23. And that's optimistic. The thing with Bogusz, and he did succeed in LA, but he was kind of the third or fourth option of the attack. He was the guy who was running in off the ball, and sometimes would get some fun options. He's Polish, so you could call him Pol Rothrock if you wanted to, right? Like his idea pretty much is that he's running into areas that have been...
But should one?
Should one?
I think one...
Who's to say?
One maybe should. One maybe will, and this one will.
All right.
But it was a situation where basically he's benefiting from the opponent focus on your Carlos Velas, your Denny Bouangas, and I'm not sure he might be the focal point here. Is what I'm trying to say. I think at this point now, Mateusz Bogusz is the sure thing of their DPs. To Joe's point, and I think that's a sure thing in certain contexts. It might have worked better in Atlanta, where he could take some pressure off Lottie Lotz for the goal scoring, right, and fade it in to the box, but. I don't know. Houston's always done things just a little bit differently than a lot of clubs, right? Like, and I think that they are one of a handful of clubs that we tend to look at and just kind of scratch our heads and say, why are you scouting in such a different way, signing players of such a different profile than so much of the rest of the league does, right? But there have been times that it has worked under this coach, so we will see. But I do tend to think that this is... Pat Onstad has pretty much turned over the roster he was inherited almost entirely, and so I think this is a year where it's going to be a sort of performance review year, and just to see like what direction is this going on the field, how clever are we being too clever in areas where we should get some sure things, or are you being clever enough where you can get past the teams that are stuck with sure things? It feels like a big year in that.
All right, well, feels like a big year for Houston. I'm guessing we'll talk about them some more in the lead up to the start of the season, but for now, gentlemen, Joe has to go write another 9,000 words just to get into 9,000 word writing shape to then write the actual 9,000 words.
Preseason. We're in preseason right now.
Exactly. But, credit to you for staying in shape, Joe. You keep those fingers clacking. Those keys are going. Nicely done, my friend.
Yeah, my S key's sticking. I don't know if that's a me problem, like I've used it too much, or if it's the laptop's problem. Either way, I would rather do the 9,000 words than a beep test, so I think I found the right preseason for me. Thank you very much, Taylor Rockwell.
Strangely, coincidentally, Jeff Ruder about to go do a beep test, I believe. Jeff, how you feeling? You excited to go run some sprints?
There has been a lot of running and sprinting lately in Minnesota, hasn't there? Yeah, no, it'll be, and it's been a tough week, obviously, but it's been great to talk MLS for an hour. So thank you guys. Greatly appreciate it.
You holding up okay, buddy?
No. I'm not. These are the sorts of things that in history class you're told that, we fought to codify the ability to not have this happen in your backyard. Mm-hmm. And we have gotten to a point where it is truly about basic human rights and respect and all of that's good. Like yesterday, a block away, right around the corner from my back door, there were 4 SUVs positioned. And so, a dozen of us were able to get over there and film them and keep them from trying to get a warrant into someone's house. But yeah, it's, it feels like something that's, you can't escape it right now if you're in the Twin Cities and you care about these sorts of things. Parents are setting up who is watching the school grounds at 3 p.m. at pickup time so that no one gets disappeared or anything, right? Like it's, I don't know. It's really hard to put this one into words, right? I think that this is just one of those where it's, you just kind of have to lock in and every day just be ready for what it's going to present. And our community is really, really damn good at showing up for each other. And we have always proven that, and we are proving that again, and we're not backing down anytime soon.
Well, that seems like a very fitting and strong note to end on. Jeff Ruder, thank you for that. Joe Lowry, thank you for all that you do. Listeners, thank you all so much for sticking with us. Hopefully you've enjoyed over an hour of MLS chat, 30 minutes of which or so was Inter Miami. I'm guessing you enjoyed that. We'll talk to you very soon.